Hello again. We are going to do fireside read aloud. Um, if you want to snuggle up with a little sibling or a buddy, we've got our buddies from school have been missing us. They came home and had some baths, and so today I have Marcel here with us. They miss you guys, and they miss reading with you guys. Let's get to our story, Boxcar Children's Spring Special. We are at chapter 3, titled, We're Being Followed. Ooh. All right, some new guests arrived today, Mrs. Parsons said later that afternoon. That's why I'm cooking an extra large pot of roast. A delicious aroma drifted in from the kitchen. May we help you? Violet offered. You can give me a hand with the vegetables and dessert if you'd like. Mrs. Parson led the way to the kitchen. Within minutes, Henry and Benny were busily chopping vegetables, while the girls sliced apples for a crumb-topped pie. Yum. Your father called today, Mrs. Parson said to Amira. Amira immediately put down her knife and looked worried. Is anything wrong? Why, no, of course not, Mrs. Parsons seemed surprised. He just wanted to make sure you're having a good time. Well, I am, Amira said slowly, thanks to my new friends. Everyone began talking about their visit to the capital, and Jessie noticed that Amira seemed happy as long as the conversation didn't revolve around her. She never wanted to talk about herself or her parents. Jessie suddenly realized that she didn't even know whether Amira had any brothers and sisters and decided to ask her. Amira immediately looked guarded. I have 2 brothers and a sister, but they're they're at home with my mom. That's nice, Violet said warmly. She seemed to sense that Amira was uncomfortable. What time is dinner? A voice boomed into the kitchen. Everyone turned to see a large woman in a dark purple dress. It'll be ready at 6, Mrs. Wentworth. Mrs. Parsons turned and slid a pan of biscuits into the oven. Mrs. Wentworth consulted her watch. Well, I hope it's going to be served promptly at 6, she retorted. I haven't had a bite to eat since lunchtime. I'll be glad to make you a cup of tea, Mrs. Parsons said a little wearily. Just concentrate on dinner, Mrs. Wentworth snapped. That will be quite enough. Wouldn't you like to meet the children? Mrs. Parsons began, and then stopped abruptly. Mrs. Wentworth had already swept out of the kitchen. Wow, Benny said softly. Is she going to be eating with us every night? Mrs. Parson bit her lip as though she were trying not to laugh. Yes, she is, Benny. I'm sure she's very nice, once you get to know her. Mrs. Wentworth barely nodded when she introduced to the Aldens and Amira and frowned all through dinner. Luckily, there were other guests to talk to, and Violet started a conversation with Mr. and Mrs. Cooley, who were professional photographers. I have a new camera, Violet confirmed, and I'm still learning how to use it. She was very proud of the camera that Grandfather had bought for her. Do you develop your photographs yourself? Henry asked. Yes, said Mrs. Cooley. No, said Mr. Cooley at the same time. They looked at each other and laughed nervously. What we mean is, Mrs. Cooley began, and her voice trailed off. Sometimes we do, and sometimes we don't, Mr. Cooley explained. There was a long silence. Henry was puzzled, but didn't say anything. The Cooleys seemed so uncomfortable talking about their work. Jessie spent most of the dinner hour talking to John Suttereth, a quiet man from New England who said he was an artist. He seemed to know a lot about Washington and was enthusiastic when she told him they were visiting the Smithsonian the very next day. Make sure you visit the Air and Space Museum, he advised her. It'll be quite an experience. We have our own personal tour guide, Benny spoke up. He smiled at Peter Marshall, who brought coffee and apple pie in from the kitchen. Peter made a thumbs-up sign to Benny. Air and space at noon, he said. We'll be there, Benny said happily. After turning out the lights later that night, Henry glanced out the window. He was sharing a bedroom with Benny at the front of the house, and he had a good view from the tree-lined street. Suddenly, he noticed a pair of headlights creeping down the road. Curious, he watched as a long black limousine paused in front of the Parsons' front door and then slowly moved on. What was the limousine doing, he wondered, and who was inside? Benny stirred sleepily and sat up in bed. Is that the long black car again? He asked drowsily. Henry nodded, still staring out the window. It's a limousine. Have you seen it before? Benny yawned. It passed by the house 3 times tonight. Henry turned in surprise. Are you sure? Benny nodded. I'm positive. I bet it belongs to someone really famous, he said. Maybe it's the president of another country, and they're looking for the White House. Maybe, Henry said thoughtfully. He glanced over at his brother, who had already pulled the covers over his head. Something strange was going on. He was sure of it. First, there were the men in sunglasses who seemed to be following them at the Capitol, and now the limousine. And he also had the feeling that something was wrong at the Parsons. Mrs. Parson had reached into her purse for a $10 bill after dinner and had come up empty-handed. When Jessie asked her if everything was all right, she had made light of it. Things have a way of disappearing around here, she had said. But was that all there was to it? Henry wondered. She had complained about missing a roll of stamps and some money from petty cash just the day before. And now money was missing from her purse. Was there a thief in the house? Henry turned away from the window and climbed into bed. He decided to talk to Jessie and Violet the next day. If something was going on, everyone needed to be on their guard. Benny was beside himself with excitement when they arrived at the Air and Space Museum the following morning. There was a huge DC-3 hanging from the ceiling, and they walked under a model of the Wright brothers plane. We learned about the Wright brothers in school, he said, tugging at Jessie's hand. They flew the very first plane at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. Orville and Wilbur, Amira added quietly. As usual, she seemed to be up on everything. Look, Jessie said, reading a plaque. They only flew for a total of 12 seconds. They went up 120 feet into the air and then came down. It's amazing they got up at all, Violet pointed out. See how fragile the plane looks? Maybe touch the moon rock? Benny asked, darting a few feet away. The sign says it's okay. I guess so. Jessie followed him to a small exhibit near the front door and watched as he touched a flat triangular stone. It doesn't feel like anything special, Benny said, looking at his fingertips. If I saw it lying on the sidewalk, I probably wouldn't even recognize it. It's 4 billion years old, said a guard nearby. Wow, Benny touched it again. Who found it? It was the Apollo crew, the guard explained. I wish I could take a piece of it home with me, Benny said. The guard laughed. So do a lot of other people. But I have a better idea. How would you like to take home real astronaut ice cream? Benny clapped his hands together. May I? You can buy it in the gift shop. It's freeze-dried, of course. After lunch, Benny, Violet said, pulling him away, Peter's waiting for us. The glassed-in cafeteria had a wonderful view of the mall, and the Aldens and Amara joined Peter Marshall at a long table by the window. Everyone munched on submarine sandwiches while Peter described the Sea Air Operations exhibit. It's just like being on a real flight deck, Benny. Maybe go there right now? Benny was excited. I want to take a picture first, Violet said, standing up. Scoot in close together, everyone. She backed a few feet away from the table. Smile, she said as the camera clicked. I think I got the Capitol in the background. Oh, darn, she added. That's the last one on the roll. Don't worry, Peter told her. There's a place around the corner that develops pictures in an hour. We can drop off your film after lunch, and it will be ready this afternoon. Well, that is it for Chapter 3. The next chapter for next week is Chapter 4, Danger in Air and Space. Ooh, I'm excited to see what happens next. I love you guys. We say bye. Till next time. See you later.